Hello super friends and welcome to DCTV Talk, and in today's episode we're going to be breaking down and reviewing Legends of Tomorrow Season 4 Episode 7, otherwise entitled Hell No Dolly. And before you proceed with this review, make sure you've seen the episode as it will be filled with spoilers. So once again, we are back in an interesting position with Legends of Tomorrow. I've been so up and down with this season, and this episode, again, I have very mixed feelings on. Although I don't think it's the worst episode of the season, it's definitely not the best episode of the season, and like I say, overall, I'm very mixed on this episode. I think this has some really awesome parts in it, but then some very weak parts in it too. So let's dive in. So I'll just get this one out of the way first. The storyline in the Time Bureau with Mona going after this werewolf character who was cast. This kind of blossoming love story, I guess you could call it. Honestly, I just don't care for this. I have no time for this. I think this is ridiculous. And I know Legends is ridiculous. I know Legends is over the top. I know Legends is the show that had a giant cuddly animal defeat a time demon. However, I just don't buy this. I don't think this is, you know, a tangible, real thing, you know, and especially when Legends, I think, has one of the best relationships in the Arrowverse with Sarah and Ava. I think, you know, going from that to this, there really is no comparison, and honestly, this storyline, I have no time for it. Also, I think it's very apparent that Garry is clearly becoming an issue this season, because the reason why Garry worked, and the reason why he was so funny, was because he showed up every now and then, and just got involved in these hilarious situations just purely by luck and by chance, whereas now he's very much, I think he's a recurring role. I can't quite remember if he's a regular or a recurring character this season, but he's obviously in it a lot more than he was last season due to popular response. And obviously I can't exactly fault the CW for putting him in more episodes, because like I say, he was really popular. But I'm just saying last season, his role in season 3, the role he played, is much better suited for his type of character than what they're doing with him in season 4. We also had like a mini conflict going on in this episode between Ava and McCrory. This was fine. It was just basically the book that Mick had got over like a couple episodes ago. Ava has basically confiscated it as evidence for the Time Bureau. I mean, it was just, you know, they needed some conflict and, you know, some maybe potentially funny moments, so this is what they went with. It's not particularly anything important. It has no bearing on the episode of the season. It's just kind of fluff. Now, one of our main storylines is we have Sarah, and we also have Charlie, Zari, and Constantine, and also Ray as well, head down to New Orleans to investigate a new fugitive who has basically changed the timeline to the point where they are now basically the most notorious serial killer in the history of the United States. And this is very interesting. I actually really liked going to New Orleans. I thought this was a fun setting. This is what I like about Legends, when it does go to these really awesome, you know, different and more unique time periods, and I feel like this worked really well for Legends going to New Orleans. I think this really was beneficial to them to go to this particular place, and this storyline was fine overall. I mean, it kind of is just a complete misdirect, because it's not really the main storyline of the episode, because it kind of evolves into something else, and even with that, the original sort of main storyline is a lot more prevalent, and I'll get to that in a minute. Now, this storyline basically evolves into this ghost possession story, where we actually see that this thing that possessed this woman is actually possessing dolls as well. Now, this is the type of stuff from Legends I actually quite enjoy. I really love this kind of embracing of the silliness of it, and I just thought that the whole possession of the doll thing was really funny, especially because not only is it just creepy and scary, but seeing the way that obviously this managed to, you know, embody the Martin Stein, you know, puppet, I thought was hilarious. That was so funny. I remember seeing that in the trailer when they released it, like before the season started, and I remember just waiting for this episode, because that is such a funny decision, such a smart one to go for as well. It would have been amazing if we would have gotten Martin Stein or Victor Garber to come back to do the voice for it, but I guess that wouldn't have really made sense. But it was still really funny just to see the Martin Stein doll just going around kicking all the Legends' asses. I thought it was so much fun, so entertaining, and again, this is the type of humor that I think Legends really works well with, is when it does things like this. Stuff that is quite silly in concept, but something that works really well in execution. Now, the proper main storyline of this episode is actually Constantine's origin. We actually get to dive into Constantine's backstory a little bit, and this I really enjoyed. Constantine's been a bit of a weird character for me this season. I feel like he's been a really good addition, and obviously Matt Ryan is fantastic in the role, but he kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to me when it comes to the rest of the characters, and I think that's because he's kind of the only superpowered one left on the team. Everyone else is kind of just an average person, whereas Constantine is kind of the only one who actually has powers. But Constantine's origin I thought was really well handled because we actually get to see this character named Des who he had a romantic relationship with and who eventually he was forced to send to hell in order to send a demon back down there with him. Now, I thought all the scenes between Constantine and Des were really well acted. I really liked the two of them together. I think it was a really good relationship, well established in the short amount of time provided. And I think it really did, show quite a lot of backstory for Constantine. Because obviously Constantine is a very broken guy. He's a very secluded guy. Somebody who doesn't like to build relationships anymore due to clearly his past. And this is one of the things that he's talking about. But just these whole stories and the way that he was having to deal with this inner turmoil within himself to kind of go back and stop, what happened was really interesting and something that we haven't really seen Constantine deal with before. Obviously, we've seen like Sarah deal with it with Laurel and things like that. But seeing Constantine deal with it, given the fact he's not an expert in time travel, he just kind of like wants to do it and just has no qualms about it whatsoever. And Zari's having to kind of stop him. But I thought all of that stuff was absolutely excellent, and just seeing Constantine's origin for the first time, diving into his backstory a little bit more, was really interesting, and I like that, because given the fact that Constantine is kind of the only new member of the Legends we've got this season, I know he was obviously in last season, but he wasn't a member of the Legends, but it seems like the only new member. It's nice to get a bit of backstory on him. Also, one of my biggest complaints about Legends this season, which I feel like could maybe be getting hinted at here, is the villain. I feel like the villain obviously has been non-existent. We have no idea who the villain is. We've got a slight little tease in episode 1 with Constantine getting thrown around in his apartment, and I feel like this could be the next tease. I feel like the villain is going to be this demon that Constantine sent to hell, but he's going to come back in the body of Des. Given the fact he sent Des with him, I feel like he's going to come back in the form of Des. I feel like that's what this is going to be, and if that's the case, I think that works really well, and also in a way is going to bring Constantine into it full front, which I think is what this season's really trying to push. Obviously this season is really heavily magic based and heavily trying to push Constantine, and I think if they want to continue to do that, that would be the best way to do it. And also what would be really good about that as well, sending this demon to hell and coming back in a human form, again, it gives it a bit more of a personal connection because we can have a human to actually see and talk to and actually have a connection with, instead of just being like a big CGI kind of monster like Malice was. Because that's why I think Malice talking through Nora was kind of interesting, but given the fact that Nora was a character we kind of already knew, it didn't pay off as well. But given the fact that this is basically a new character, I think this will work so much better. But Constantine, being the rebel without a cause that he is, actually does go and basically messes up the timeline and basically, essentially, breaks time. Now, obviously, we saw time break at the end of Season 2, and this is what brought us into Season 3, but this is just Constantine purely by himself breaking time. So Charlie gets her powers back, which I don't quite know why that was an effect, but we'll have to see what goes on. And then all of the Legends just freeze in mid-air during the Martin Stein puppet fight. Zari turns into a cat. I have no idea why that happens. And also Mona is kind of trapped in her own space as well. So Constantine has broke time. I don't know, obviously this is going to lead into the mid-season finale next week. I don't know, I mean the promo looks crazy. I think we're going to get so many different versions of the Legends, and that is really exciting. I think next week's episode is going to be really a lot of fun, especially because they have so many options now that Constantine has broke time. And I like the fact that Constantine actually did break time, because, we were always warned so much about not breaking time and things like that, and having to skirt around all these different options. But given the fact that Constantine, he's not experienced in time travel, he's not the type of person who is able to follow the rules in that sense, being able to actually just break time and seeing the consequences of that, I think is going to be really fun, and I think it's going to make for an excellent mid-season finale for this so-so season. Overall, though, like I say, I kind of have mixed feelings on this episode. I think it has some really strong parts, like with Constantine, like his origin story and how this is going to lead into the mid-season finale, and also potentially the setup for the villain, I think is really cool. I really like all that stuff, and it really made Constantine feel like a proper part of the show, which I don't really feel like he's been so far. And I thought all that stuff was really strong, but then there were some weaker stuff, like, the love story with Mona. Just didn't buy it at all, not here for it, don't need it. And the Ava and Rory tension just felt a bit, pointless, just because they kind of wanted to have something, and that's just what they went with. So, kind of a mixed episode, mixed reviews, but I feel like overall this episode is perfectly enjoyable to watch. I definitely had a good time watching this one, and like I say, purely based on Constantine, I think this episode is a definite watch. I definitely think you should watch this episode just for Constantine's backstory, because it will really give you, quite a lot of information that we didn't know about Constantine. And overall, yeah, I enjoyed this episode. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, it'll help me out a lot, and share this video with anyone and everyone you know who loves DC TV, and get them to join the community. And as always guys, please subscribe for all of your latest content on Supergirl, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, and Arrow. And with all that said guys, I hope to see you again in my next video.